You take a moment, you look at the calendar. July is flying by. We're getting closer to a college basketball season. It's time for the computers to start computing. Math is being done. We're getting projections for what a college basketball season could look like. People giving all thoughts about what this Duke team can be. I'll tell you one thing, a lot of people think they're going to be really good.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson, the host of Locked On Blue Devils. We are your one-stop shop for everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. We talk a lot about Duke basketball. This week, we've had a big focus, of course, on Duke football. It was a great opportunity to be in Charlotte for ACC kickoff, getting to hear from Manny Diaz and a couple of players ahead of this upcoming season. But today, I want to talk about basketball, and I've got our good friend Josh Smith from the Devil's Den podcast to join us on the program. We'll talk about some of these latest projections in the college basketball world ahead of the new season. The Devil's Den guys had a great interview with head coach Jon Scheyer and a couple of other fun topics that I want to get to at the end of today's show. Locked On Blue Devils, of course, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special shout out to all of our everydayers who make us a part of your day each and every morning or whatever it is that you consume our show. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this video, share it with your friends. And on the podcast side of things, of course, leave us a 5-star rating and written review. The written reviews on the Apple side of things in particular really help the algorithms out and make the show be found. So thanks again for your support there in that regard. Without further ado, I'm excited to welcome him in. Here he is, Josh Smith, back with us once again. It's so good to see you, man. We're not quite to college basketball season, but day by day, man, we're getting just a little bit closer.
Yeah, man, it'll be here before we know it. You know, it won't be long before we'll be at Media Day in October. It's gonna happen quick.
I don't know what to call this time of year, Josh, right? Because we're going to talk about Bart Torvik has a couple of T rankings that have come out with projections for what the year will look like. As soon as the national championship game is played, we instantly rank teams going into next season, and that gets deemed the way too early look at teams, right? So here in July towards August, I think we're still classified as early. Would you say? Maybe I'm trying to figure out exactly where we're at when we look at these teams, man.
Yeah, I mean, because some of them just found out their rosters just a few weeks ago, right? So it's
true.
Still kind of like, yeah, it still feels new. But we're getting a lot of coverage this year, JJ, from Duke itself, like from the media team putting a lot of scrimmages out. Maybe they've always done that, but it seems we've gotten quite a few for it to be this early.
Absolutely. The Brotherhood podcast, people were concerned who's going to sit in that chair once Ryan Young has graduated, and Caleb Foster, C-Foss, as he's been known to be called on the show, has done a great job in the majority of those. And we are getting a good bit of coverage. I think people love seeing the scrimmage clips that are put out, and it's only building kind of to the hype and what this Duke team can be. I want to get to what the national people and what computers are thinking about this Duke basketball team. But as you've gotten a chance to sit with your thoughts, you had thoughts when it was way too early, Josh. Now here we are, August right around the corner. How are you feeling about the Duke team going into the season?
It's hard not to be a little bullish on this team, really. I mean, I kind of came in, like you were saying, right after, I guess, kind of the season ended, looking at the roster, and kind of felt that we were about where we should have been in some of those preseason polls. Now it's almost like I feel like we might be a little underrated. So looking at the 8, 9, 10, some of us have as high as like 4 or 5. But I mean, you hear what Cooper Flagg's been doing for the USA Select team. You've seen what Common's done with South Sudan. It's hard not to think that like this could be a really good team, the best under Jon Scheyer.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the roster looks like it's got the perfect blend of pieces, and it's big. I mean, what a massive roster that Duke's got going into the season with no player under scholarship that's shorter than 6'5". I mean, wow, the size that this Duke team has.
Yeah. And when we talked to Jon, he was like, that's intentional. We wanted to get big. We want to stay big. And so we might talk about it, but some of the recruits that he was looking at in 25, 26, continuing to prioritize size.
And that's important when you look at what the college basketball game and basketball in general has become. Everybody's getting larger and larger and larger. It feels like everybody is now able to kind of shoot it from the outside, regardless of position. And the big fellas are able to handle it well. The game just continues to change a little bit. So as we look at this Duke basketball team and you sort of think where Duke was at the end of the season, now adding a couple of transfers, this big recruiting class that they've got coming in, and Caleb Foster and Tyrese Proctor in the fold once again, we're seeing Duke basketball projected as one of the top teams in the entire sport. Not necessarily in the best team in the sport conversation like they were last offseason with Kansas, but still at the top. And in some ways, it's a little strange because everybody's already talking about Cooper Flagg being the absolute best player in the sport. And in my mind, I'm going, okay, best player, does that not equate to best team? Right away, I'm a little confused there, but nonetheless, Duke absolutely viewed as one of the top teams.
Yeah, and I think that has trended too, like with our opinion as well, right? Like I think some of these metrics are starting to say, okay, maybe we did have this team a little bit lower. Maybe there were some question marks. Cooper being able to show that he potentially could be the number one option offensively, that's going to be huge. I mean, that was really my own question mark about him in particular was, can he be the number one guy offensively? Is that really his strength, or is he more of the Swiss Army knife? Sounds like he might be able to do both.
Without a doubt. And I think that that's only going to help what the Duke team's going to be capable of doing this upcoming season. So BartTorvik.com, he's got his T rankings for the upcoming season. They've been released now, and Duke number 2 in the country behind just Houston. Projected record for the Blue Devils, according to, again, a computer's putting all this out there into the world. 22-6 mark, 16-4 in the ACC. We've got North Carolina at number 6 in his rankings, and then you don't see another ACC team inside the top 30. So by and large, it looks like it's kind of a 2-horse race. A lot of people are thinking, and the computers back that up as well when you look at what Duke and Carolina can be this year.
Yeah, and that's kind of a sad trend for the ACC, right?
Yeah.
This is not the first time. It really, once all of the major players coaching wise seem to get out of it, the conference just took a hit, man, and they're going to have to address that. I think it's somehow, some way.
I don't know how exactly they'll be able to do that unless, these other teams in the conference start to play better. Hopefully that's not at the expense of what Duke is trying to do, but it's crazy, man, what the ACC is regarded as. We've just fresh off a week of celebrating new in the football world with Cal and Stanford and SMU joining the fold on the gridiron. They'll also be joining the fold on the hardwood as well, but I don't know that that's necessarily bringing up the floor of the conference as a whole.
Yeah, I tend to kind of agree with that, right? That it's still a concern. Speaking specifically to basketball, what makes it real difficult is the scheduling. And some teams have really kind of figured out, okay, this is how you schedule to build the conference and to boost your own resume. I don't think the ACC has really quite figured that out, because with so many conference games, you have to schedule super intentionally in the non-conference. And, I know Brownell down at Clemson has talked about that a little bit, but I think as a conference, we could get better.
Again, looking at these rankings that have been released at BartTorvik.com as we look at the upcoming college basketball season, Duke number 2 in the rankings behind just Houston. Inside the top 10, the Blue Devils are the only team underneath 40% in terms of returning minutes at 26.6. Everybody else inside the top 10, very experienced in terms of the talent that they've got coming back going into the next season, which is different. And that makes it even more interesting that these unknown commodities, you might think, in the college game, still in the computer world, when you look at the math and these projections, are equating to a really good basketball team for Duke.
Yeah, and I mean, really, outside of Tyrese Proctor, that might be all that you have that's a known commodity from Duke, right? I mean, we saw a little bit of what Caleb Foster could do as a freshman. You're hoping that he can take a leap. I think he's probably close to what could be an X factor for this team, especially when you look at perimeter guard depth. We're going to need him and Proctor to really have kind of jumped a little bit here.
All right, we've got more conversations to be had here about the Duke basketball team going into the new season. We've got Josh Smith here from the Devil's Den podcast, and we'll continue this conversation after our first break here today on Locked On Blue Devils. Show today brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is my absolute favorite when it comes to buying tickets. Right now, Gametime also an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer that it gets to first pitch. How cool is that? With these killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guaranteed, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. That's right. We said lowest price guaranteed, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. All-in prices will show you the total up front, so you've got no surprise fees that pop up there at checkout. You can also get that panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know what you're walking into. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Obviously, right now, we're in the heart of Major League Baseball season, but you can also get tickets for other sporting events, concert, comedy, theater, and so much more. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back at it on Locked On Blue Devils. I'm JJ Jackson. That's Josh Smith from the Devil's Den Pod. You can follow them on X at Devil's Den Pod 247. You guys recently had another annual opportunity to chat with head coach Jon Scheyer. Tell us a little bit about that. We want people to go listen to that conversation if they have not done so already. But what were kind of the big things as you kind of thought out? What do I want to know from Scheyer in the summer? What were those things, Josh?
Yeah, we really wanted to get him to articulate a little bit the idea of getting tougher and what it means to compete at this level. Because he's talked about those things, especially throughout last year. A lot of the press conference was we just didn't compete at the level that we needed to compete at. And he talked about wanting to get tougher. So I wanted to kind of say, well, what does that really look like, right? Like you hear a lot of this guy's a dog, well, what is that? How do you quantify that as a coach, right? Like, what are you looking for? We wanted to get into that. We wanted to get into some of the conversations that he had with the guys that left, right? And the guys that were coming in. That part kind of blew up a little bit. Right? I think people kind of took that and ran with it. The idea of the tampering. If you listen to the whole clip, though, he's actually just kind of saying, like, look, this is just, it is what it is, right? And it's going to be coming both ways. Everyone has an agent, so agents are allowed to talk amongst each other, right? So it wasn't like a blame thing. It's like, okay, here's the reality. Moving forward, we're doing everything's a 1-year commitment for them to us, from us to them, and then we reevaluate. So I think you're seeing that shift from year 1, year 2, year 3 of how he plans to use the portal, what he's looking like to do in the high school rankings, as evident by the 25 and 26 class.
And so going back into the podcast prep, wise to think about that, right? Because, okay, what are we going to ask this head coach about? The roster is totally different. You know, at the end of the season, as soon as the loss happens against NC State in the Elite Eight, everybody wants to know questions. Scheyer's talking about now we've got to have these independent conversations with the players on our roster ahead of this upcoming season. And it sounds like it was pretty immediate after that game's over that those things start to happen.
Yeah, within a week, I mean, for a lot of it. And, you know, he said it's just brutal honesty. It's brutal transparency of this is where we're at. This is how we see you next year. Where are you at? If those things match up, great, let's move forward. If not, you know, we'll help you get where you need to go. But I think the most important thing he said was that we don't make any promises. I'm not making any guarantees. You have an opportunity to compete, to earn a spot, but there's no promises being made. So that's kind of that old Coach K-ism that you kind of like to see is just the standard for the program.
And totally different compared to the first year when Duke has nobody enter the transfer portal, got a couple of players coming back into the season. And now going into the 2024-2025 season, we will see 7 individuals in college basketball that wore a Duke jersey last year, still playing in the college game, just wearing a different jersey as they get set for this upcoming season. Really unique. And you mentioned kind of the traction that Scheyer's clip got also comes at a good time because just recently this week we saw The Athletic put together a really in-depth profile from Brendan Marks, Kyle Tucker, and CJ Moore, talking to many different coaches at the high major level, mid-major level, about just simply that, players fielding calls and coaches getting calls regardless of where they're at in the season, with a look at what the next season could look like. It's just unfortunately something that appears we're going to have to get used to.
It's just like unsanctioned free agency, like what we've never seen before. And I'm someone that's all about, like, what these players decide and have the ability to move around the same as the coaches do. But I do think at some point you have to find some sort of middle ground here, whether that, I think the most likely might be that we start to see some like multi-year contracts from NIL stuff that's kind of dependent, linked to schools in some way. Obviously there'll be a clause for they can get out of that if there was like a coaching change or something comes up. But I don't know, man. That's a lot to deal with. I mean, we're about to see as college basketball staffs pretty much have to be their own business, and Duke's already that, really. But I think you're going to see that across the board. Someone's really got to be monitoring this stuff.
Go check it out. Devil's Den podcast. Your co-host Raul made the good point to Coach Scheyer himself. It's like, hey, it's almost 3 different levels of recruiting that you're now having to do throughout the course of the season. The high school world, you've got what's going on currently with your roster itself, and then what's out there in the transfer portal. Like, it's a lot to keep up with. And then the numbers coming out in the athletic story, nearly 2,000 players in the transfer portal, just over 1,900, I believe. It's been growing in volume by at least 200 players every season since the transfer portal first came into the sport in 2018. That's an average of 13 scholarship players. At least 5 of your guys in Division I basketball are not going to be playing on your team next season. That's insane. It's not like they're going. That's not counting the numbers going to the NBA or graduating. That's 5 players into the portal.
Right. And then how many of those, like at Duke, probably not, but like across the board, how many of these guys don't find landing spots or ending up in like way worse situations? It's not always greener, and I think there's a lot of enticement for them to enter the portal. So it's just, you hope it works out. A
couple of more things that we want to talk about with Josh Smith of the Devil's Den podcast on today's show. And we're going to do that when we come back after this quick break here on Locked On Blue Devils. Thanks so much for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen or first watch here today. Go ahead and check out Locked On ACC as soon as this one's over. Our hosts, Alex Dono and Kenton Gibbs, do a remarkable job of covering the Atlantic Coast Conference. Big-time stories this week out of ACC kickoff. What's going on with Clemson and Florida State and their future within the league, all that and more ahead of an exciting ACC season. Also, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. It's Locked On Sports Today, covering the top sports stories with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Bringing him back in, Josh Smith is here from the Devil's Den podcast on X at Devil's Den Pod 247. Promote the podcast, Josh. I mentioned the Jon Scheyer episode, but that's not the only conversation you guys have had recently. And what can people expect from you guys in the days and weeks and months to come?
Yeah, we've done some good ones. We had Dan Favale come on. He's the host of Hardwood Knocks over at Bleacher Report, covers a lot of NBA stuff. So any of your NBA fans, go check him out. We had him come on, talk about the draft process a little bit. Had Brian Geisker come on and do a little bit of a pre-draft. Obviously, we've had head coach Jon Scheyer. Highly recommend you check that one out. We just had Steve Clark of the Devil's Den. That one came out this week. Or actually, maybe that was last week, of covering Peach Jam. So at Peach Jam and the Adidas Championship. So if you're into recruiting, there's not a whole lot offer-wise that we've got out now, but there are some guys that are starting to pop up. You might be familiar with Braylon Mullins and some of these other ones that are starting to set up visits. So definitely check that out. Go over to thedevilsden.com. And if you want the inside scoop for some of that stuff, Adam's got got that on lockdown. So, yeah, exciting. We're hoping to get a few others coming on. We just recorded one that'll drop at some point about the 2015 team, since that's coming up on the Big Ten year. So we kind of do a little bit of a deep dive into that, and maybe we'll get Jeff Goodman on. We're trying to sync that up now. So stay tuned.
Terrific. Yeah, that's really exciting. Make sure you check it all out. Devil's Den Pod 247 on X, and search for the Devil's Den Podcast wherever it is that you get your podcasts. All right, so this off season, August right around the corner, we'll start to look a little bit at what this Duke team would look like. But during the summertime, there's still other topics and conversations happening in the Duke basketball adjacent world, right? We're seeing Jason Tatum and Team USA gear up this weekend to get started in the Paris Olympics. How are you feeling about our fine country and Mr. Tatum ahead of the Olympics?
Yeah, there's maybe a bit of concern, right? The exhibitions didn't go great, I would say. At the end of the day, though, you look at the talent just across the board, and we no longer have the top 5 players in the world are not American at this point, right? Like, that's not the case. But from a roster 1 through 12, it's still very difficult for anyone to stack up for that. So you hope that they figure things out, get KD healthy, maybe. That'll go a long way. But yeah, it's rip Coach K, right? Missing Coach K.
How big of a factor do you think Tatum can be?
I'd like him to be a bit more empowered. He seems to kind of just fade in and fit in a little bit. But if KD's really not going to be able to be 100%, they're going to need Tatum to be Boston Tatum.
For sure. And finding a way to make that all fit with LeBron at his age and Steph
Shouts
Curry.
LeBron, though, right? Like, LeBron's been incredible.
It's been awesome to watch what he's doing. Big LeBron guy. So excited to see him kind of carrying the load thus far. But that coaching staff, when you've got, we find it hard when you're looking at 13 scholarship players and only 1 basketball, making sure that you divvy up minutes and shots correctly. This isn't even factoring in what it must be like for that coaching staff when you've got the best players in the country, and you could argue the best players in the entire world, trying to go out there and win this gold medal.
Yeah, and we've seen, Coach K made it look easy, and obviously we're going to be a little bit biased here, but if you look at like USA basketball 6 years prior to K and maybe the 6 years, it's been rocky. Even Popovich, it's been rocky. So, he was doing something, and we got to figure out, we got to get that back. I know Grant is wanting to win at an all-time level. So
without a doubt, yeah. Hopefully, Team USA can get the job done. I think they will. Feeling optimistic. Excited to see this team. They've got to find a way to get it done. I mean, I
wish they would have took Kyrie. Especially with some of the injuries. I wish they would have called up Kyrie. But
for sure, that would have been really excited to get him on this team, because he's certainly one of the best in the country right now. So, all right. Also, right now, we just got out of ACC kickoff, and everybody wants to talk about the new college football video game that has entered the world. It's a good time of year, right? In summer, where there's not as many sports going on that you feel like you got to keep up with. What have you thought of the game, Josh?
It's good, right? And I mean, I haven't played Madden religiously the last few years, so maybe that's nice. I've had a break. But I can't put it down, man. I ran my alma mater, App State. I'm in my 2nd season, just beat NC State. So I'm in it, I'm into it. I love it.
Without a doubt. I mean, all the animations and the actual idea of having players on your team, insane. You think about the best scenes in college football, whether it be Howard's Rock at Clemson, and you're thinking about the Eagle flight at Auburn and Boomer Sooner running out onto the field. Everything is built within this game, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's cool. And the playbook and the atmosphere, that's something that the NFL stadiums you have, but the home court has always been a huge thing, or home field in college. So it's cool to have that here as well.
So it's got us thinking, what does a college basketball game look like in 2024? How incredible. Again, no plans right now to make that happen. I wish there were, considering the fanfare that there has been with this college football game. But man, I don't know that we necessarily had that home run of a college basketball game in years past compared to the football game itself.
Right.
But look, they've had some time off. Maybe these past decade plus, you figured out how to make it successful, because I know I certainly would love to see it.
Yeah, the last one I had was it was 2K7, I think. It had JJ
Okay.
Redick on the cover,
Yes.
right? And so
Yep.
that was the last time. But I had played it all the way, probably the last 7 or 8 years prior to that too. Would love to be able to do that again, right? To play in Cameron, to have with the name, image, and likeness attached to it. Like, who doesn't want to run with Cooper Flag right now, right? Like, that would just take my money.
Exactly. Yeah, we're ready for that. Cameron, the graphics in 2024, I would imagine those crazies would legit be crazy and just beautiful to look at, man, in the video game world.
Yeah. And if you can create your own schedule a little bit, like you can in the football one, to just say, all right, game 1, we're going to Fog Allen and let's
Right.
go. You know,
Let's make it happen. No, that's
Yeah.
a good thought. That would be epic. All right, Josh. Well, I really do appreciate the time as always. If you will, one more time, promote your work and everything you guys got going on.
Yeah, appreciate it, JJ. So the Devil's Den podcast, like you mentioned, anywhere that you listen, you can find us on the boards at thedevilsden.com. If you want to sign up over there, they got all sorts of deals and promotions. A lot of recruiting stuff goes on over there, so check that out. And you can find us on Twitter /Twitter at Devil's Den Pod 247.
Without a doubt, Josh. It's great to see you as always. Thanks for stopping by.
Appreciate you, JJ.
That's Josh Smith joining us on the show today, talking about everything going on in the Duke basketball world. That'll do it for our show here today. Thank you so much for your support. As always, subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast feed, leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Go Duke! I'll talk to you soon. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.